The grand chamber of the Kythar conclave was a monument to stillness, a place carved from the heart of a captured asteroid where light itself seemed to hold its breath. Crystalline walls, grown over millennia, refracted the cold starlight from the void outside into 1,000 muted rainbows that danced upon the polished obsidian floor. In the center of this immense cavern, suspended by gravitic emitters that hummed a tune just below the threshold of hearing, was the High Council platform. Upon it sat the assembled elders of the Galactic Arm's most ancient and powerful federation, beings whose thoughts could shape the destinies of star systems. Yet today, their collective consciousness, a force that could calm nebulae and steer fleets, was a maelstrom of fear. A single, vast holographic display dominated the space above them, replaying a silent, horrifying ballet. It showed a world, a verdant jewel named Olaris IV, being systematically unmade. There were no grand explosions, no chaotic volleys of energy weapons. Instead, a lone vessel, stark and geometric against the planet's gentle curvature, methodically traced lines of incandescent fury across its surface. The beam it projected was not a lance of light, but a wave of absolute negation, a tide of pure entropy that erased continents, boiled away oceans, and scoured the atmosphere down to the bedrock. When it was done, all that remained was a sterilized, glowing sphere of glass and molten rock, its biosphere utterly and irrevocably annihilated. The vessel, identified only by a fragmented transponder signal as the human warship Vindication, then turned without haste and vanished into the void, leaving behind a silence more profound than any scream. High Elder Vorlag, his chitinous exoskeleton a deep, ancient purple that signified his station, watched the recording for the 10th time. His multifaceted eyes, which could perceive the quantum signatures of a dying star, could not fathom the cold, methodical perfection of this act. It was not war. War was a messy, passionate, often desperate affair. This was something else. It was an execution. It was a cleansing. They leave nothing. Vorlag's voice resonated through the chamber, a low thrum that vibrated in the very stone. No survivors, no debris field of a defending fleet, no distress calls. They do not conquer, they do not occupy, they simply erase. He gestured one of his 4 slender arms towards the hologram. The Oloran were a pre-warp civilization. They posed no threat. They offered no insult. Their only crime was existing in the path of this thing. To his left, General Kalen, commander of the Conclave's formidable defense fleets, clenched a powerful manipulator fist. His carapace was the color of hardened magma, scarred by battles fought in the defense of a dozen member worlds. "It is a predator," Kalen declared, his voice a sharp crack in the chamber's oppressive silence. "A new apex predator has entered our territory, and it hunts with a purpose we cannot comprehend. We have analyzed the energy signature of its weapon. It is a causality disruption beam. It doesn't just destroy matter, it unravels the very fabric of spacetime in its path. The technology is beyond anything in our archives. This is not the work of some upstart race stumbling upon ancient technology. This is the calculated application of a power we believe to be purely theoretical." "And their ship," added Emissary Lyraxis, her form fluid and shimmering, a being of semi-sentient energy contained within a crystalline shell. Her voice was like the chiming of distant bells, yet it carried the weight of cold logic. "The Vindication. It moves without a detectable gravitic wake. It transitions into hyperspace without folding space. It simply ceases to be in one location and appears in another. Our long-range sensors can only track its departures, never its arrivals. It is a ghost, a specter that leaves only sterilized worlds in its wake. To fight it would be to fight a shadow." The debate had raged for days, ever since the first, garbled reports from the Olaris system had been pieced together. Humanity, a species the Conclave had been observing for a mere few centuries. They were a young race, confined to their single system, noteworthy only for their rapid technological advancement and their broadcast fictions, which were filled with paradoxical themes of immense empathy and spectacular violence. The Conclave had classified them as a level 3 developing species, intelligent, volatile, but contained. A potential future member, perhaps, in another 1,000 years, once they had outgrown their internal conflicts. No one had predicted this. No one had conceived that this fledgling race could produce a vessel that could single-handedly render a planet lifeless in a matter of hours. "Their fictions were not fictions," Kalen insisted, his gaze fixed on the sterile sphere in the hologram. "They were warnings, blueprints. They have been doctor. Aiming of conquest, of destruction, and now they have built their dream. We must act. We must assemble the Grand Armada at the Cygnus Traverse and prepare for a preemptive strike on their home system. We must excise this threat before it can metastasize. A preemptive strike against a foe whose capabilities we do not understand, Lyraxis countered, her light pulsing with soft disapproval. You speak of war, General, but what if they are not waging war? What if this is something else? Look at the trajectory. The Vindication did not emerge from the direction of their home star. It came from the galactic rim, from the uncharted void. Its path is not one of conquest, expanding from a central point. It is a line, a deliberate, calculated transit across this sector. It has cleansed 3 other uninhabited worlds before Olaris IV, all of them geologically unstable or bombarded by radiation. We dismissed those events as natural phenomena. We were wrong. They were practice. Vorlag let the silence stretch, allowing the weight of Lyraxis's words to settle. The emissary was right. The logic was flawed. A conquering species would radiate outwards, securing territory, building supply lines. The Vindication behaved like a surveyor, or worse, a purifier, following a preordained path of destruction. There was a terrible, dispassionate intelligence to its actions that was more terrifying than any berserker rage. "What are you suggesting, emissary?" he finally asked. "That we are missing the context," Lyraxis replied. "We see the act, but not the reason. An act of such totality implies a philosophy behind it, a belief system. To destroy a world so completely is either an act of supreme malice or supreme necessity. Before we commit our fleets to a war we may not be able to win, we must understand which it is. We must attempt to communicate." The general scoffed, a grating sound of chitin on chitin. "Communicate with a storm? It will interpret our hails as a sign of weakness. It will trace our signal and bring its unmaking weapon to our own worlds." "It already knows of us," Lyraxis said, her form glowing a little brighter. "The Olaris system was within our sensor range. They knew we would see this. They performed this act in our sight. This was not just an execution, it was a message. The question is, what is it trying to tell us?" Before Vorlag could respond, a new alert chimed through the chamber, a soft, insistent tone that signified an event of the highest priority. The hologram of the dead world vanished, replaced by a tactical map of the sector. A single red icon, labeled Vind-1, had appeared. It was not at the edge of their space. It was deep within it, a mere few light hours from the Cathar Prime Nexus, the very heart of the conclave. It had not been detected on approach. It had simply arrived. A collective tremor of fear, a silent wave of psychic shock, passed through the assembled elders. The shadow was no longer at their border. It was in their house. It made no hostile moves, the disembodied voice of the conclave's central intelligence reported. It is holding a stationary orbit around the gas giant Cathar 7. It has powered down all non-essential systems. It is waiting. General Kalen was on his feet, his voice booming. "It is a challenge, a declaration. It dares us to act. Scramble the fleets. I will meet this insolence with the full might of the conclave." "No," Vorlag commanded, his voice cutting through the general's fury with the cold authority of ages. "Hold the fleets. It could have appeared above our homeworld. It could have appeared within this very chamber. It chose a position that is non-threatening. Deliberately so, Emissary Lyraxis is correct. This is not a prelude to an attack. It is an invitation to speak." He turned his ancient gaze to Lyraxis, her shimmering form a beacon of calm in the rising panic. "Emissary, open a channel. Let us hear the voice of the storm." The chamber grew utterly silent again, the only sound the faint hum of the gravitic emitters. A new window opened on the holographic display, a stark black field labeled Incoming Transmission, Human Vessel Vindication. For a long moment, nothing happened. The elders waited, their ancient hearts or equivalent organs pulsing with a tension they had not felt in centuries. They were the apex civilization of this galactic arm, the keepers of peace, the arbiters of destiny. And they were about to speak to the architects of a silent, world-ending apocalypse, a species they had dismissed as primitives. The fear in the room was not of battle, but of revelation. They were afraid of the answer to the question that now burned in every mind. Why? Then the black screen resolved into an image. It was not a snarling alien visage, not a warrior clad in intimidating armor. It was the bridge of the human ship, a space of clean lines, dark metals, and soft, cool lighting. The crew members visible in the background were calm, focused, moving an economy of motion that spoke of long-practiced discipline. And in the center, seated in a simple command chair, was a single human female. She was neither young nor old. Her face was etched with lines of weariness, but her eyes, a pale, piercing gray, held a profound and unsettling stillness. She wore a simple, dark uniform, devoid of rank or insignia. When she spoke, her voice was not the roar of a conqueror, but a quiet, measured tone, translated instantly and perfectly by the conclave systems. "This is Ambassador Eva Rostova of the human vessel Vindication. We address the Caithar conclave. We are here to talk." Her gaze was direct, unwavering, and held within it a sorrow as vast and as cold as the void between galaxies. The architects of planetary death had come to parley, and they had sent a diplomat who looked as if she carried the grief of 1,000 worlds upon her shoulders. The mystery and the terror had only deepened. The immense chamber of the conclave remained steeped in a silence that felt heavier than a collapsing star. Ambassador Rostova's face, projected in a hologram hundreds of feet high, was a study in contradictions. It was a face from a young, volatile species, yet it held an ancient stillness. Her eyes, magnified to the size of shuttlecraft, showed no aggression, no arrogance, only a profound, bottomless exhaustion. General Kalen remained standing, his posture a rigid display of defiance, but even he was momentarily silenced by the sheer, unnerving placidity of the human. It was High Elder Vorlag who finally broke the spell. "Ambassador Rostova," he began, his voice a carefully modulated bass that betrayed none of the turmoil within the council. "I am High Elder Vorlag, speaker for the Caithar conclave. You have entered our sovereign space without leave. You have committed an act of unprecedented destruction against a sentient, pre-warp species under our observation. You then appear in the heart of our territory, not with weapons powered, but with a request to talk. You must understand that your actions are difficult to reconcile." The human ambassador inclined her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, not deference. "We understand," she said, her voice calm and even. "We did not expect you to. We did what was necessary. The fate of the Olorin was sealed long before we arrived. We offered them an ending, not an annihilation." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the council members. General Kalen took a step forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "An ending? You call that firestorm of negation an ending? You call the vitrification of a world a mercy? Your words are poison, human. They are the ravings of a genocidal mind attempting to justify the unjustifiable." Rostova's gaze shifted to the general. Her expression did not change, but the cold stillness in her eyes seemed to intensify, to focus into a point of immense pressure. "General," she said, her tone remaining level, "what you witnessed was not an act of war. It was a sanitary procedure. It was a tragedy, one of countless we have been forced to enact. I do not ask for your understanding yet, only for your patience. I am prepared to transmit to you the complete, unedited sensor logs from our approach to and departure from the Olaris system. Our data, our analysis, our historical records. Everything. We are not here to conceal what we have done. We are here to explain why there was no other choice." Emissary Lyraxis's shimmering form pulsed gently. "An offer of complete data transparency? That is unexpected. What would this data show us, Ambassador?" "It will show you the truth," Rostova replied. "It will show you what was growing on Olaris IV. It will show you the reason for our mission, and it will show you the enemy we have been fighting for a very, very long time." She made a subtle gesture with one hand off-screen. "The transmission is ready. It is a vast quantity of information, a full spectrographic, biological, and quantum state analysis of the planet before, during, and after our intervention. We ask that your most trusted scientific minds analyze it. In the meantime, I will answer your questions." Vorlag exchanged a look with Lyraxis. The offer was unprecedented. No species, especially one engaged in such aggressive actions, would willingly hand over its complete operational data. It was either a trick of unimaginable complexity or it was the truth. He made a decision. "Our scientific councils will receive your data. While they analyze it, explain this enemy you speak of. Was the Olorin civilization developing a weapon? Were they a threat?" A flicker of something, not quite pain, but a shadow of it, crossed Rostova's face for the first time. "No," she said softly. "The Olorin were not the enemy, they were the victims. As was their world, the enemy has no name we can pronounce. We call it the corrosion. It is not a life form in any sense you would understand. It is a contagion of reality. Flaw in the code of the universe that spreads, that rewrites existence into something else. Something silent and wrong." She paused, letting her words sink in. The concept was alien, terrifying. The conclave dealt with fleets, with empires, with stellar phenomena. The idea of a flaw in reality was the stuff of esoteric philosophy, not practical statecraft. "The corrosion manifests first as a biological blight," Rostova continued, her voice taking on the quality of a lecturer describing a terminal disease. "It begins with subtle mutations, a breakdown of genetic information. Then it moves to the environment. The physics of the planet begin to drift. Constants fluctuate. The very laws of nature become suggestions. The final stage is cognitive. Sentient life loses its sense of self, its memories, its very consciousness, becoming little more than a vessel for the corrosion's expansion. The process is slow, agonizing, and irreversible. It is a hollowing out of a world, leaving behind a shell that looks alive but is merely an echo. General Kalen let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. This is absurd, a fairy tale to frighten hatchlings. You destroyed a world based on a superstition. Look at the data, General, Rostova said, her voice edged with a sudden, sharp weariness. Our sensors detected the primary indicators on Olaris IV. The initial genetic drift was present in 87% of its biosphere. We recorded localized temporal fluctuations. The planet's magnetic field was beginning to decay in nonlinear fashion. By our models, they had less than a generation before the cognitive symptoms would have become pandemic. Their civilization would have dissolved into a quiet madness, their world slowly turning into a place where cause and effect no longer held sway. The chamber was silent again. The data was streaming into the Conclave's archives, a torrent of information that would take even their advanced systems hours to fully parse. But preliminary reports were already flashing on the private displays of the council members. The human data was clean. It was raw, unredacted, and filled with notations of a scientific rigor that was staggering. And it corresponded with subtle anomalies their own long-range sensors had dismissed as instrument error. So your solution, Vorlag said, his mind reeling with the implications, was to burn the world to its core. The corrosion is an informational plague, Rostova explained. It spreads. A world fully consumed by it becomes a new source, a new node in its network, broadcasting the flawed code of its existence into the quantum foam. Left unchecked, it could have spread to other systems. The causality disruption beam is the only tool we have that can effectively sterilize a world of this contagion. It doesn't just destroy the matter, it erases the corrupted information, cauterizing the wound in reality. It is a terrible weapon, we know that, but it is the only cure we have for a disease that is infinitely more terrible. Lyraxis pulsed, her light a soft, inquisitive blue. And how long have you been fighting this corrosion? Rostova's gaze seemed to drift away for a moment, looking into a distance far beyond the conclave chamber. The weary lines on her face deepened. Since before we first left our star, it found us early. It took a great deal from us. The Vindication is not a warship in the traditional sense. It is a vessel of the last protocol. We are not conquerors. We are janitors of the apocalypse. We follow the trail of the corrosion, and where we find its infection has taken root beyond any hope of salvation, we are forced to perform this final, terrible service, to prevent its spread, and to grant a swift end to those who would otherwise face a dissolution of mind and soul. The weight of her words settled upon the council like a physical shroud. The image of the brutal, merciless human warship was beginning to fracture, replaced by something far more complex and tragic. These humans were not predators. They were something far stranger. They were physicians, wielding a scalpel of pure energy, cutting away the gangrenous limbs of the galaxy to save the whole. The sheer psychological burden of such a task was difficult to comprehend. To travel the stars, not in search of wonder or knowledge, but in search of incurable disease, bearing the sole responsibility for its containment. Hours passed. The conclave remained in session, a silent, tense vigil as their best minds raced to verify the humans' claims. Rostova remained on the screen, patient and still, answering their questions with the same unwavering, somber calm. She explained the science of the corrosion, the nature of their detection methods, the ethical framework of the last protocol. She spoke of the agonizing calculus they were forced to perform for each world, the threshold of infection beyond which no hope remained. Then the final report came in from the head of the Conclave Science Academy. His aged, reptilian face appeared on a secondary hologram, his expression one of profound shock and intellectual horror. "High Elder, the human data is valid," he reported, his voice trembling slightly. It is flawless. Their sensor readings are of a resolution we can barely comprehend, but our own archival data, once re-examined through the lens of their models, confirms it. We saw the signs at Olaris IV. We saw them, and we did not understand. The fluctuations, the energy signatures. It is all there. The planet was dying. According to their projections, and our own now that we know what to look for, it was already lost. A deep, collective sigh seemed to pass through the chamber, not of relief, but of shared, horrified understanding. General Kalen slowly lowered himself back into his seat, his massive frame seeming to shrink. The enemy was not humanity. The enemy was a formless, existential horror that had been moving through their space completely undetected, and the humans, this young, underestimated race, had been fighting it alone. Ambassador Rostova, Vorlag said, his voice now imbued with a new respect, a new gravity. You have borne a burden that no species should ever have to bear. You have done it in silence, and you have accepted the galaxy's condemnation as the price of its safety. We offer our deepest apologies for our assumptions. For the first time, a flicker of genuine, unshielded emotion crossed Eva Rostova's face. It was a profound, aching sadness. Apology is not necessary, High Elder. Understanding is all we have ever hoped for. We did not come here seeking allies. We came only to explain so that you would not waste your strength fighting a shadow while the true threat gathered at your door. Our path is a lonely one. Perhaps, Lyraxis chimed in, her light glowing with a warm, empathetic frequency, it does not have to be. The shimmering emissary turned her focus to Vorlag. High Elder, the humans have shown us a truth we were blind to. They possess the knowledge, the technology, and the terrible experience to fight this corrosion. We possess the resources, the fleets, the industrial might of 1,000 worlds. If this threat is as dire as their data suggests, we cannot allow them to face it alone. It is not a human problem, it is a galactic one. The logic was inescapable. The fear of humanity that had filled the chamber had been transmuted into a far greater, far more primal fear of the corrosion. But with that fear came a new sense of purpose. General Kalen rose again, but this time his posture was not one of aggression, but of solemn resolve. My fleets are at your disposal, he said, his voice directed at the hologram of the human ambassador. Our weapons are primitive compared to yours, but we have ships, we have soldiers. We can help. Show us how to fight. Rostova looked at the assembled faces of the council, from the hardened general to the wise elder to the luminous emissary. She seemed to be seeing not a council of aliens, but the first friendly faces her people had encountered in a very, very long time. A single, small tear traced a path down her cheek, a stark, glistening line against her weary skin. We would welcome your help, she said, her voice thick with an emotion she had held back for what must have been an eternity. The burden has been heavy. The alliance was forged not with treaties and fanfare, but in a shared, somber silence in the face of a cosmic horror. The Caithar fleets were mobilized, not for war with humanity, but to join the Vindication in its grim patrol. Human scientists and engineers were dispatched to begin the arduous process of retrofitting conclave ships with the sensors needed to detect the corrosion's subtle taint. For the first time, humanity was not alone in its vigil. In the days that followed, as the two species began the slow, careful process of integrating their efforts, Emissary Lyraxis was granted permission to come aboard the Vindication. She wanted to understand the humans, to feel the texture of their existence, their culture, their sorrow. She was guided through the ship's quiet, sterile corridors by Ambassador Rostova herself. The vessel was less a warship than a monastery, a mobile tomb dedicated to a single, sacred, and terrible purpose. The crew spoke in hushed tones, their faces etched with the same profound weariness as their ambassador. They were not warriors, they were custodians of grief. They stood together on the observation deck, a wide expanse of transparent material that looked out upon the swirling clouds of the gas giant Caithar 7. The view was majestic, a canvas of amber and crimson, but neither of them was truly seeing it. Your resolve is unimaginable, Lyraxis said, her shimmering form casting a soft glow on the deck. To have faced this alone for so long, to have carried this secret, where did it begin, this fight? Where is your homeworld in all of this? Is it the fortress from which you wait? This war... Ambassador Rostova turned away from the viewport to face the emissary. Her expression was one Lyraxis had not seen before. It was a grief so absolute, so fundamental, that it seemed to be a core component of her being. The weariness was gone, replaced by a raw, open wound of loss. We have no homeworld, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The corrosion found us first. It took root in our cradle. We fought it. We tried to cure it, to contain it. We developed the science, the technology from a state of near desperation as our world was unraveling around us. But we were too slow. We were too young. Her gaze drifted back to the stars, but it was clear she was seeing something else entirely. A memory, a ghost. We built ships like this one, orcs, to escape. We took as many as we could, and we enacted the first last protocol on our own planet. We were the first world we were forced to cleanse. We unmade our own cradle to stop the plague from spreading from its source. Lyraxis felt a wave of coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature of the void. The sheer, tragic weight of that revelation was almost too much to bear. You destroyed your own home. We called it Earth, Rostova said, the name spoken like a prayer for the dead. It was beautiful, green and blue, full of life, full of flaws, full of us. She took a steadying breath. We have been a people in exile ever since. We have founded other worlds, new homes, in systems we thought were clean. We would terraform them, seed them with life from our genetic archives, and for a few generations we would know a semblance of peace. We would call each new home Earth in our hearts, a promise that we could rebuild what we had lost. She finally looked back at Lyraxis, her gray eyes reflecting the distant stars like chips of ice. But the corrosion is patient. It is relentless. It seems to find us no matter how far we run. The worlds we have been sterilizing on our path to you, they were not alien worlds, emissary. They were our colonies. They were our new Earths. Each one a new hope that became a new tragedy. Each one another home we had to say goodbye to. The truth crashed down upon Lyraxis with the force of a supernova. The name of the human ship, Vindication. It wasn't about vindicating humanity's strength or its right to exist. It was about vindicating the memory of the dead, vindicating the agonizing choice to grant them a clean end rather than let them be consumed by the slow, mindless horror of the corrosion. And the title that the Conclave's intelligence had given the human operation, based on their brutal efficiency, the Earth Killers. It was a misunderstanding of cosmic proportions. They weren't destroying other people's Earths. They were destroying their own again and again. The phrase from the sensationalist news reports, "Goodbye, Earths," wasn't a threat of future conquest. It was a lament. It was humanity's recurring, heartbreaking farewell to itself. The scope of your tragedy is beyond comprehension, Lyraxis managed, her own form dimming with shared sorrow. You are not just fighting for the galaxy. You are fighting for a memory, for a home that no longer exists. We fight so that one day we might build a home that lasts, Rostova corrected gently. So that no other species has to make the choices we have made. The Conclave's offer of an alliance, it is the first time in our recorded history that we have had cause to hope that we might not have to fight alone. It is the first time the word home has felt like more than just a memory. They stood in silence for a long time, the alien and the human, looking out at the vastness of space. For the Caithar, the universe had until today been a place of predictable orbits, political maneuvering, and manageable threats. Now it was a place haunted by an ancient, existential disease. But it was also, for the first time, a place where they were not the sole guardians of civilization. They had found a younger sibling, a species forged in the crucible of unimaginable loss, who had been standing watch in the dark all along, fighting a battle for the soul of reality itself. A soft chime interrupted the stillness. A communications officer's voice came over the internal ship system. "Ambassador, the Conclave has forwarded a priority message. It's a signal they've been analyzing for decades from the intergalactic void. They thought it was a natural phenomenon, a pulsar echo. But using our analytical models, they've decoded a layer of complex information within it." Rostova tapped a command on her wrist. A holographic display shimmered into existence between her and Lyraxis. It showed a complex waveform, but embedded within it was a repeating sequence. A message. It was not Caithar. It was not human. It was something far older, far more alien. "What does it say?" Lyraxis asked, her form pulsing with anticipation. The ambassador's weary eyes scanned the translated text, and the blood drained from her face. The look that replaced it was not one of sorrow or weariness, but of a new, dawning, ice-cold dread, a fear that dwarfed everything that had come before. She looked from the message to Lyraxis, then out at the endless expanse of stars, as if seeing the true scale of their struggle for the very first time. "It's not a natural phenomenon," Rostova said, her voice a hollow whisper that seemed to be swallowed by the immensity of the void. "It's a warning, and it's not about the corrosion." The message on the screen was short, a fragment repeated over and over across the eons, a desperate cry in a bottle thrown into the cosmic ocean. "It is not a flaw, it is a tool. The silence is not the end. It is the preparation they are harvesting." The human and the Caithar stared at the words, and the universe around them suddenly felt infinitely larger, darker, and more terrifyingly deliberate than they had ever imagined. Their war had just begun, and they had been fighting the wrong enemy all along. They had been fighting the plow, not the farmer.